Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webinar. For those of us who it's our first time to join this webinar, feel welcomed. It's part of a series of webinars we are having that looks at Kenya's fiscal policy and the paradox around it. So this is hosted by the Institute of Economic Affairs. We are a think tank that conducts research on policy issues and advises on matters policy, both locally and globally. So in today's webinar, we are looking at Kenya's fiscal paradox, how national policies, fiscal policies narrow inequality, but pushes up poverty. For the webinar, we will have a session. You might notice that your camera and your mic is muted for now, but after the presentation, we'll have a moment for a plenary where your camera and the mic will be active. During the webinar, please feel free to shoot any questions in the Q&A, or you can use the chat, but thereafter we'll have a plenary session where we'll be able to address all the questions that you might have raised and create a moment of interaction. In today's webinar, we have two presenters. We have Vivian Ochola and Norm Omalwa, who are both colleagues in the Institute of Economic Affairs. Speaking to you, my name is Jotham Chacha, and feel welcome. I now take the pleasure to invite Vivian, who will be going first through the sessions, and thereafter she'll invite Noah to pick up, and then we'll get back to the moderation session. Thank you, and welcome, Vivian.
Okay, thank you very much, Chacha. I welcome you all. So today we are discussing on the Kenya's fiscal paradox. We are continuing with the series, and our main focus today is how national policies, that is the fiscal policies, not the monetary, narrow down inequality but pushes up poverty. And our synthesis will narrow it down to county levels. So for the outline, we want to understand what poverty is and inequality. Then we'll see the role of public participation. Then we'll understand Kenya's poverty and inequality patterns by county. Then evidence from fiscal policy. Finally, we'll look at the policy implication and recommendations. So for the introduction, so one thing to make clear is that inequality and poverty are not the same. So these are two different things. They are not the same. And we can see the differences in the table. So the table shows us that inequality measures how income is distributed, while poverty measures whether people can meet the basic needs. So poverty will show whether people are then for inequality, the second point is that it focuses on the gap between the rich and the poor, just the gap between the rich and the poor, while poverty focuses on whether people fall below a poverty line. So for poverty, we normally have a poverty line. So it will tell us how many people or whether people fall below that poverty line or above that poverty line. Then inequality is measured using poverty rates such as headcount or extreme poverty. And for this analysis, we are using the headcount rates. Then poverty, I interchange them. Then for inequality, it is measured using Gini coefficient or income shares. So one thing we need to identify in these differences is that these two things are not the same, and there's no theory that suggests that the best relationship can be either inverse relationship between poverty and inequality or a direct relationship. There's no theory that suggests so, because we know that there's a point in a certain country where poverty can be higher and inequality higher, or poverty can be lower and inequality higher, or even poverty lower and inequality higher. So we find that there's no theory that claims which direction or the relationship that should be between inequality and poverty. But by the end of this study, we will understand where our focus should be. Should it be on poverty or inequality, and what implications? Next. So we have given a brief introduction of the difference between poverty and inequality. So let us understand the role of citizens in public participation in the budget making process. So from this, we are able to understand that every year, that is every financial year, the financial year runs from July to June. Like now we're in the financial year 2025-2026 that will end in June. So every year, citizens participate in a budget process. So they ensure that resources are allocated most efficiently and they generate maximum welfare. So the ultimate goal for every resource allocation is to maximize the social welfare. So for this implies to reduce poverty, and also to reduce inequality. Then after that, it will also enable to generate public good and spur inclusive growth. So let us see, how does public participation help? It helps in three important things. Number one, It helps in better information. So citizens will be able to know how resources are allocated and who benefits from that resource allocation. Then it also helps to prevent plunder, that is to prevent corruption and wastage, because leaders will be accountable to their citizens. To include fairness. So it will help increase fairness through inclusion in decision-making process. So we understand that it is important for the public to participate so that the resources that are being allocated maximize the social welfare of a given country. So in our Kenya, under one of the Constitution, it tells us that public money shall be used in a prudent and a responsible way. So when the public participate, so it ensures that that article of the Constitution is well applied. Thank you. Next. We see is important. Now let us see how the government intervenes in terms of to address issues of inequality and poverty. So it intervenes through fiscal policies. So what are fiscal policies? So fiscal policies basically how the government uses taxes, government spending, and borrowing to manage economic activity. So the two major things are the taxes and we have the spending. So we know that taxes are through VAT taxes, value added tax, we have income tax. So those are just example of taxes we have here in Kenya. So taxes takes away individuals' income. So when a government intervene through taxes, it takes away individuals' income. So it reduces the disposable incomes. So when we come to this other side, that is now the spending. The spending now increases individuals' private income. So these will in turn increase disposable income, which is expected to reduce welfare. So when you look at this one, we realize that for the spending, they can be either through cash transfer, infrastructure development, health, we have education. So the fiscal policies intervene in two ways. It either takes away individuals' income through taxes or increase individual income through spending. So that is how the fiscal policy intervenes. Now we have the legal framework that for budget participation in Kenya and citizen welfare. So for the we already saw Article 201. We also have Article 10 that have the national values. We have democracy that allows public participation, transparency, and accountability. We have Article 43 that gives the right of individual, right to health, right to education, right to food, and right to houses. Then we have now the Public Finance Management Act 2012, it provides the structure basically for budget preparation and approval. And we know that public should participate all the way from agenda setting to the implementation of the budget. Then we have the county governments, because this study or this webinar, we are focusing on the counties. So the county governments under Act 2012, it shows that the public participation is required in the county planning and budget. So this is not a national thing, it is also narrowed down to the county levels. Then we have the vision development anchor. So we know in Kenya Vision 2030, sustain economic development, there's a vision of equity and social, inclusive, then improved quality of life to all citizens. So these are just the legal framework that help us understand why this is really important. Then now let us see the overall poverty rates, individual at now the distribution, because our main focus will be on the poverty. So overall, 20 million people in Kenya are affected by poverty. Then poverty is concentrated mostly in the ASAL counties. Then 39.8%, that is close to 4% of Kenyans live below poverty line. So this implies out of 10 people, 4 of them live below the poverty line. So if you look at the map on your right, it shows us the distributions per county. So we are able to know something that is really amazing is that counties that are towards the north and towards the eastern, so they are so much affected by poverty. They are more poor as compared to the counties towards the south and the west south. So, and we all know that the counties towards the north and the eastern part are ASAL counties, arid and semi-arid land counties. So we realize that poverty is more concentrated on the ASAL counties as compared to non-ASAL counties. So this distribution is very important. Then now when we go to the trends in welfare, so we want to compare poverty. Remember we said there's no correlation, there's no much theory that suggests the best relationship. But from these charts, there's something that we are able to note. So on the left, we have the poverty trends. So this shows us the trends for between 2005, then there's a gap of 10 years. Then we have 2015 all the way to 2022. So we're able to see, if you see the trend line, that is the green line, poverty trends have been decreasing, but at a very slow rate, But when we look at the other side, the inequality trends, it has been increasing at a very faster rate. So in Kenya, inequality is really decreasing, but poverty is not decreasing as fast as inequality. Then, if you look at now our chart specifically, sorry, go back a little bit. Now, if you look at our charts, we're able to note that in 2005, poverty rates were at 45.9%. So almost close to 5 or 10 in 2005. Then it went a little bit low in 2019, but during COVID-19 in 2020, it rose to 42.9%. But since then, we have not recovered yet. We have been slightly below 42, but the poverty rates are still very high. Now, when you look at inequality, it was high, 47 in 2005. Then when you look at 2020, now let us shift our focus to 2020 in both scenarios. We're able to know that in 2020, poverty rates were very high, while inequality were very low. So this shows us that a country can be equal, but can still be poor. So in 2020, because of COVID-19, many people lost their livelihoods, poverty rates went very high, but people were equal, or equality was a bit low. So that is able to tell us that these relationships, sometimes they can be lower at the same time, they can be higher at the same time, or they can be inversely related. So there's no specific theory to suggest which is the best relationship. So I'll welcome Noah to take us through the analysis and the synthesis in the county levels. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. Yeah, so Vivian has taken us through at a high level the trends in the poverty and inequality rates, and has also taken us through the legal background in terms of the fiscal policy, the institutions that are involved, how a fiscal policy is implemented. And also they also reminded us that each and every year we participate in the budget making process. Yeah. So in a nutshell, the main goal of the government is to increase welfare. And welfare, we can look at it in terms of poverty, reduce poverty, but also reduce inequalities. That is distribution of income across counties. So I would like us to look at the key findings across the counties. So there's this study that was done by the World Bank together with the KIPRA, and they got the data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Yeah, it looks at the paradox, as in the paradox here, it means in as much as we had spending and these fiscal interventions, that is both in terms of taxation intervention and also in terms of the spending, we have a paradox in that we have a much higher rate in the reduction in terms of inequality, but a lower rate in terms of reduction in poverty. And so that was at the national level, as Vivian has explained, and we want to look at the county level, how it is. Yeah, so to start with, I'll lay some theoretical underpinnings, how taxes operate, that is how taxes affect the income of the households. So for example, in the study, it was found that VAT, that is value added tax, and excise taxes are regressive. Regressive means that as you increase the tax, it is the poor people that bear the burden disproportionately compared to the rich. And we can have an example. For example, think of, for example, airtime. If you charge excise duty on airtime, and let's compare between the burden in terms of this tax between the rich and the poor. Who will bear the most burden? Remember, we are the tax being posted here is the same. A person living in Turkana, for example, and a person living in a place like Limani. So you'll find that the person living in Turkana will bear the heaviest tax. In as much as the same rate, he'll bear the most tax. Or let's say VAT on a packet of funga. It is 16%, but in terms of the burden, that is, burden here means the level of sacrifice. In terms of a person who is living in a slum, even within Nairobi, for example, a person living in a slum and a person living in a posh area, you'll find the person living in a slum will bear the most tax of this, yes. So in this case, we are saying the study finds these two taxes to be examples of regressive taxes. Now over to direct. So VAT and excise are examples of indirect tax, mostly based on consumption. You purchase something is when you pay the tax. You purchase, for example, unga is when you're going to pay the tax. You purchase airtime is when you're going to pay the tax. But then we have direct taxes. Direct taxes, example, include pay as you earn, payee. So if you are employed, every month, payee is deducted on your payslip. Or if it's a company, so direct taxes are examples are two, pay as you earn and corporation tax. So they were found to be progressive mainly because of the graduated scale. When you look at the bands, the tax brackets, so those who earn, for example, below 30,000, they are waived, they don't pay tax. The next, the 10%, those who take 10% pay a certain rate. Yes, sorry, those who earn above 30,000 earn a certain rate, and the scale is graduated, 10% to 15%, 30%, like that. So in that case, we find they are the tax there is progressive. Yeah. Then when it comes to spending, so spending has different ways. We have direct spending, for example, free primary education. Instead of a household paying school fees, this fee is paid by the government, for example. Or in a higher education, it is subsidized. But the impact here mostly is at the lower level, primary, especially primary level, where the spending is more progressive. Then, of course, we have health spending, and then we have social protection. These are the cash transfers. Now, of all these, education, spending on education had the highest impact in terms of pulling people out of poverty. Yeah, and also reducing inequality. Yeah, because the reason is the rich, in most cases, you'll find they'll be able to afford education, send people abroad or send people in elite schools. But the poor, they are heavily dependent on the government to subsidize education. They're not able to afford very high quality education. So with health. So with health, you find those who go to private, I mean, the rich will afford by going to private health cares, but then you'll find the poor will heavily depend, especially at the low level in the low level health facilities. In this case, the dispensaries. Yeah. So when the government subsidizes health, especially at the lower level of the health facility, is able to disproportionately benefit the poor. Yeah. Then social protection, the cash transfer, especially if it is well targeted, really it pulls many people out of poverty. Yeah, but then the findings by the report show that in as much as cash transfers really benefited, the cash transfer include, for example, pesa kwa wazee to overseas, orphans, vulnerable children. So when these households with these people are well targeted, it really pulls people out of poverty. But then the situation is that these cash transfers are too small, so they don't have very huge impact in pulling many people to out of poverty. Yeah. So over to the counties, and let's begin by looking at poverty rates across the 47 counties. What is the change? Generally, what is the general pattern? The general pattern is that poverty rate increased. Poverty rates increased across the counties when you look at between these two periods. And I think it worsened during COVID, and we have not fully recovered. Yeah, as Vivian showed. So we find some counties, for example, Turkana, the poverty rate increased from 78 to 82%. Then we also find, for example, a county like Wajir. Yes, Wajir was 62, and it has increased to 64. Wajir is number 7, that is 2015-16, and number 7, still number 7, 2022. Yeah. Then we have some counties that have been stagnant. For example, Nairobi, bottom last, was 16.7%. 16.7 means that out of all people who live in Nairobi, 16.7% are living below the poverty line. The poverty line is 3,900 for the urban area and around 3,200 for the rural areas. So 16.7%, and it increased to, it reduced to 16.5%. It means, okay, when you convert this into absolute numbers, so let's say Nairobi were about 4 million people. So, and compared to population, in terms of absolute numbers, you find that in absolute numbers, the people living in poverty increased in as much as the rate has reduced. Yeah. And generally across Kenya, you find currently, as Vivian said, about 20 million people now across the nation are living in poverty. And in 2015, it was just around 14 million people were living below the poverty line. So poverty rates, more people, in terms of absolute numbers, more people are living below the poverty line. Yeah. Then in terms of inequality, yes, here we find some improvement in terms of inequality. Turkana, for example, 52.2 in 2016, and currently in 2021-22, it is number 2 with that 7.8. So it has reduced in terms of the inequality rate. Yeah. Generally, we saw some improvement in terms of inequality. But then, okay, now we want to synthesize the first two charts. And we use this chart by plotting the inequality on the y-axis. This is shown by the Gini coefficient and poverty rate on the x-axis. Yeah. So the first quadrant, that is top right quadrant, we find counties that are mostly in ASALs, arid and semi-arid lands. For example, Samburu, Kwale, Kilifi, Marsabit, Tana River, Garissa, Turkana. These counties feature most in this quadrant because they have relatively high poverty rates and relatively high inequality. Yeah. This is 2022, the last year, 2022. Now, the best quadrant is this quadrant number 3, the low bottom quadrant. So the dotted lines, they are medians. So median is dividing the counties into half. So these counties, the counties falling in this quadrant include, for example, Kiambu, Lamu, Machakos, Nandi, Siaya, Murang'a, Mombasa, Nyandarua. Yeah. So mostly, yeah, in around the central and a bit of Mombasa at the coast and Siaya to the western side of Kenya. Yeah. And Nyeri central. So you find the odd one out are just about three counties here: Nyeri, Embu, Amifo, and Meru. But then you also find in top left quadrant, these counties have high inequality and low poverty rate. An example here include Nairobi. Yeah. So Nairobi it represents a clear paradox whereby it has low poverty rates, but I think because of the slum issues, it has very high inequality. Yeah. Then the bottom right, these counties falling in this quadrant include Baringo, Makueni, West Pokot, Wajir, Kitui, Elgeyo Marakwet, Bungoma, Bomet, Mandera. So in this quadrant, we find counties that have very high poverty rates, but have low inequality. So as Vivian said, inequality and poverty are not the same thing. In some cases, we may have very high poverty rates and low inequality. So this is another paradox. And these counties are mostly rural counties. Yes. So you'll find, for example, Wajir, for example, Mandera, West Pokot, Kitui, they are more rural counties. But on the left, those that have low poverty rate, they are more urban counties, or tend to be. So in summary, you'll find urban areas, you'll find they have low poverty rates, but those urban big cities also tend to attract a lot of slum, for example. They tend to have high inequality. That's why you find on average, urban areas are falling in the second quadrant. Yeah, high inequality, low poverty. But now rural counties generally will fall in the fourth quadrant. High poverty rates and generally low inequality. Yeah, but inequality is not very low, as you can see, it's around 30. Yeah, so that is the paradox when you look at it in these four quadrants. So the policy intervention should be, we need to move counties out from the first quadrant, the likes of Samburu, Turkana, Kwale, Kilifi, Marsabit, all these, so that they tend to move towards the third quadrant, so that they can have low inequality and low poverty rates. Yeah, so that is should be our main interventions. Now, another synthesis of the first two charts is this chart where we are looking at the change. So from 2015-16 to 2022, we want to see how poverty rates changed and how inequality also changed over this over a decade. So we are looking at, for positive means there is improvement. Now for poverty, improvement means the rate reduced. Yeah, so we have less people living below the poverty line. Inequality, the same. So positive means there is improvement in inequality. Yeah, so people became almost equal. Then it was more equal. Now, there is also the paradox that we saw, that Vivian showed in the two charts, is also reflected at the county level. In that, those that improved, in the first part of the chart, you can see 14 counties showed improvement, only 14 for poverty. For inequality, we see more counties, 32 improved. So generally we can conclude and say there's more improvement when it comes to inequality, but there's less improvement when it comes to poverty rates. The brown part of the bars represent the ASALs. Now, when you look at the second chart, you find more brown in terms of improvement. For this other side, you find less. For poverty, you find less of the brown. So it means there is improvement, actually, more improvement when it comes to when it comes to inequality for the ASALs. Yes, but less improvement when it comes to poverty. So these ASALs still are are increasing in terms of poverty, but they're reducing in terms of inequality. Now, some of the factors leading to this is in the report is explained that devolution had an impact in reducing inequality, but then COVID affected many livelihoods, and we've not yet recovered from COVID, to say it. Yeah. Now, allow me to finish with some policy recommendations, especially from the findings by the study. So we found that in terms of the spending, cash transfers and also nutrition support, for example, in schools, has a huge impact in actually improving on equality and pulling people out of poverty. So part of the intervention should be, we need to expand, because currently it's very small. We need to expand this. But secondly, we need to improve in terms of targeting the OVCs, orphans and vulnerable children, including the elderly. Yeah. Then we also saw that education and health have also very high impact in leading to equality and also reducing poverty. Yeah, because it is pro-poor, especially at the low levels of, for example, health facilities at the dispensary levels and levels, 1 to 3. And also for education at low levels, especially the primary and secondary. Yeah. So we need to improve when it comes to bursaries and all this. We need really to support these aspects of targeting and also increase spending that aspect. Then in terms of the national tax policies, we need to reduce on regressivity of taxes. An example here is VAT and excise duties. These are not pro-poor. They are pushing people more into poverty and also leading to inequality. Yes, there is now, you find most people who are living, who are living in informal settlements, or generally who are in informal sector, are heavily affected by these indirect taxes, VAT and excise. They cannot do without spending. And in terms of the share distribution of their income, most of their income is spent on food. And VAT and excise taxes, yes, really affect the consumption, which is mainly in this case food for those who living in informal sector. So what we need here is we need to improve. For example, provide provide zero rating, for example, for basic commodities, especially foodstuffs, so that they don't spend most of their income on food. We reduce that burden. Then we need also to scale up climate resilient infrastructure. Most of these poor people are living in very poor conditions when it comes to housing, water supply, when it comes to just basic infrastructure, even electricity. You find some in, for example, slums living very close to the rivers. And when they swell up, all their livelihoods is swept away. So in this case, the government can intervene in really helping the poor in that aspect, so that to reduce on the risk of this segment of society losing their livelihoods due to climate changes. Yeah. Then another recommendation that we're making as IEA is that the government should have a goal of reducing poverty by half in the next 10 years, so that it comes from currently 39.8 to as low as below 20%. Yeah. And we believe through our public participation and also through improved targeting of the poor overseas, we are able to achieve this reduction in terms of poverty rates. Yeah, with that, I'd like to thank you. Back to you, Jordan.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Vivian, for the wonderful presentation. We are now going to the next session, the plenary session. If any of the participants has a question, please feel free to raise your hand, or you can use our chat box, or you can use the Q&A. I'll be able to check through and bring those questions forward. So just check the chat. We had only one question, which Vivian has dealt with very well. So now, any questions from the team? Please feel free to raise up your hand. Going once. Going twice. That's amazing. Noah and Vivian did an excellent job. We do not have any questions. probably I could reiterate on the recommendations that have come up through what the team has done, expand and strengthen social protection, of course, improve equity, coverage, education and health services, reduce the regressivity of indirect taxes on the poor, invest in economic opportunities that generate decent jobs, strengthen fiscal equity through better targeting of transfers, scale up climate resilience infrastructure, and national policy goal should be that poverty rate should be reduced by half in 10 years. That speaks volumes from the economist point of view. There have still been no any other questions. I will take this back to Vivian to share any closing remarks, and then Noah will follow suit, and then we'll get to the closing. Remember, today, before we close, we have an opportunity for you to give us feedback through a feedback form. We want to see how the session was and what is it that we can learn through or how we can best improve. I've just seen our texts before Vivian comes in. It's on the chat asking, is there a recommendation around the methods used to study poverty? I repeat, is there a recommendation around the method used to study poverty? For example, why do we still use USD per day to measure poverty line? That's a good question. So before Vivian comes in, any of you, either Vivian or Noah, can pick on that. Why do we still use USD per day to measure poverty?
Yes, thanks. And thanks for the question. Okay, let me explain. Okay, first of all, I would like to disagree in terms in saying that we are using USD. But okay, when you read the report, for example, we have the latest report that was done in last year around January on inflation. We have the poverty being anchored on spending per month, which is around 3,900 for those living in urban areas, and around 3,000. Those are shillings. 3,900 shillings for people living in urban areas, and 3,000, around 200 shillings for those people living in rural areas. So I think most studies will try to use USD for comparison across different countries, but it's not true to say we are using USD. But also let me also mention another thing, in that in most of these studies, they use what is called expenditure, household expenditure. Now, the thinking behind that is that that's as opposed to use of income. So they use how much are you spending per month, not how much are you earning per month. So most studies use expenditure. The reason behind that is that in some households, especially those that are poor, they'll receive some incomes from the breadwinners, those who household members who are maybe well-to-do, so they support the poor families, or government through cash transfers. So the thinking here is that by use of expenditure approach is more captures the reality in terms of the poverty level. Yeah. So if you're spending below 3,900, you'll be considered poor, regardless of where you got the income. Yeah. Okay, but of course there is more room for improvement. Yeah, maybe we can discuss more. Maybe need to be more specific on how we can improve. But generally, I wanted to disagree in terms of use of USD. Yeah. And then we also have other measures, as Vivian said. So what we're using here is just the head count. That is just the number of people who are living below the poverty line. But we also have other metrics of measuring poverty. So for example, extreme poverty. We also have poverty gap and all these measures. But generally, we are just basing on the basic one. But also, let me also say, okay, maybe another improvement that we can do is how we come up with this threshold, 3,900. Maybe that's something that we can also discuss further. How do you arrive at 3,900? And also, how do you maybe those people who are disabled PWDs and maybe should be varied, things like that. Yeah, that is it for me, Jordan. Maybe you can discuss further on how to improve. Yeah.
Thanks, Noah, for that comprehensive response. There being no more questions, I'm trying to check to see if we have anything. Yeah, I'm trying to check something. Yeah, I see a question here from Martin, who's asking for the counties that had a reduction in inequality. Are there specific interventions that can be highlighted that had a direct contribution to these results? It's a good question. And then I see Grace Moot here asking, is there a recommendation around the methods used to study poverty? No, that I think we had dealt with that earlier. I see Caspan, yes, you're saying share the slides, yes, as a practice, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the slides and recorded webinar for today will be up in our website within 24 hours. So please feel free to check to be able to find the slides there and the live recording of today's session. Thank you so much, Caspan. So I think that is sorted. So someone needs to respond to Martin Irungu. Noah?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let me raise. Yes, it's true the way you've observed that we have some counties, for example, Turkana, who regressed in terms of poverty rates. So while they had around 79% in 2015-16, now they have 82%. 82% means 80 out of every 100 people living in Turkana, around 82 people are living below the poverty line. That is, they're spending less than 3,200 per month. And when you convert in terms of numbers, these are very many people living below the poverty line. So some of the issues that we have seen across, including in Wajir, Garissa, and all these ASAL regions, there is an issue when it comes to governance. Yes, in as much as for ASALs, there is improvement in terms of inequality, but poverty rates, we find that they have increased, in some cases even increased. So some of the issues to improve here, we think, is in terms of targeting, for example. So in as much as we are saying Turkana, but even within Turkana, there are differences when it comes to sub-counties. So targeting, for example, when it comes to Ward Development Fund, you'll find most of these allocation or Ward Development Fund, you find is not informed by the differences between the sub-counties. So you'll find in some cases they are just receiving the same amount across the county. So we think that most of these allocations within the county should be more informed by the evidence through data. And also another thing that I can also think about is this issue of Yes, governance, that is a public participation. So in most counties across the country, you'll find public participation is very poor. You find it more or less is rubber stamping the public participation. And the CBEF, that's the County Budget and Economic Forum, that is the formal forum where these issues are discussed. You find this platform is not well constituted, or you find there's a lot of interference by the governor or the executive. So that interference means the discussions that happen on this platform, the County Budget and Economic Forum, is not of very high quality. So what I can say is that we need really to improve on public participation to make it more meaningful, so that the voices of Mwananchi, especially the CSOs that are on this platform, can also be heard to improve the distribution of the resources. Yeah, and also at the national level, you find there's also a tendency for the national government to disburse or to transfer less amount of county funds, the equalization fund, and also the equitable share. Yeah, so especially the Auditor General has highlighted the issue of equalization fund. Equalization fund, we have these ASAL counties that were mapped out, and they should be receiving this fund. But more than 45 billion shillings has not been disbursed to date. So that's also an issue when it comes to governance. So both at the national level, it's affecting, and also at the county level, when you dig deeper, you find a lot of and also in terms of spending, some of the spending, as highlighted by the Office of the Controller of Budget, is not of very high priority. You find spending on, for example, travels, foreign and even within domestic travels, and also some spending on very huge infrastructure, like Office of the Governor and the like. And yet the basic infrastructure that will benefit, for example, the students, let's say a school or whatever, is not really considered. So I think that is something, conversations that we need to have, especially to institutionalize the County Budget and Economic Forum, so that more meaningful discussions are happening at that level. Yeah. Back to you, Jotham.
Thanks, Noah, for those responses. And having checked, I think I do not see any other questions. There's no hand raised up. So allow me to invite Vivian for a closing remark. In the meantime, my colleagues in the communication team, please upload the assessment form so that participants can respond. We have basically 2 questions in the form. They are all electronic. So please, my communications colleagues, please put it up so that we are able to respond to it. Vivian.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chacha. And I thank you all for joining. So I'll conclude by saying this, reducing inequality is very important, but inequality alone does not guarantee prosperity. So even in the cases of the ASAL counties that were the inequality was able to be reduced, maybe that alone does not guarantee prosperity, because we see, in contrast, they are still very poor. So we know very well that in Kenya, ASAL counties are really affected by extreme weather conditions, both flash floods and also drought. So when it comes to instances of drought, they tend to lose their income. So maybe as they lose their income, people become more equal, but they remain extremely poor. So inequality is important, but it alone, if it is considered alone, it does not guarantee prosperity. So the government should focus on reducing poverty instead of inequality. Because we know, if you look at a scenario whereby in a country, thousands of, maybe everyone is earning 1 million, that country is rich, it is not poor and also equal. But you find in a certain country where there are people who are earning 1 million, there are people who are earning 100 100,000 or 10,000. So realize that there's inequality, but maybe their earnings or their income is above, or they spend above the poverty line. So if you consider inequality alone, then that does not really give the true picture. So the government should focus on reducing poverty and not inequality alone. So policy must focus not only on sharing resources, but the policy must not focus on sharing resources alone evenly across counties, but also expanding economic opportunities so that it may, in the long run, help households to escape poverty. So that is the conclusion. Otherwise, thank you all for joining me.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, mine is also to thank each and every one of you for joining. We believe you've learned something, one or two things. What I wanted to say in summary is that the fiscal policies is not actually neutral when it comes to the welfare, the social welfare, in terms of poverty, in terms of inequality. And I think we need to be more aware in the course of our analysis, in the course of our engagement, both at the national and also at the county level, the impact, the adverse impact on, in terms of our taxes, that's part of fiscal policy, and also our spending. Yeah. So how is it affecting the poor? How is it affecting distribution of income? We have this national tax policy. A while back, people participated in terms of sending comments to National Treasury, but we have not seen coming to fruition of this policy. So I think that's also something we need to push hard to ensure we have a national policy that is pro-poor, pull people out of poverty, and also to looking at our Vision 2030. It's only around 3 years or 4 years. So that the population should be below, in the lower income. Yes, we need to push a population out of, pull the population out of poverty. But then you find currently we are 39.8. We are still very far. So we need to put pressure to government that these policies should be pro-poor, so that at least we reduce that by half. Less than 20 people at least should be living below, should be spending below 3,200. So we look forward to having more of these sessions, even looking at how the relationship between our economic growth and poverty. Yeah. So maybe keep on the lookout. We'll be having more of this. We can discuss further. We know other institutions have also done their research. For example, we have the Oxfam that has done a study. We also want to, review that study so that we can also see how it correlates with this finding from this other study by KIPRA.